Hello and welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Kat and I'm an editor here at RM, having previously been a teacher for a number of years. And today I get the pleasure of introducing David Fitzpatrick, Senior Educational Consultant at RM, and Patrick McGrath, Head of Education Strategy at Text Help, for this keynote session. David and Patrick are both Google certified educators and will be exploring some of the latest Google features to support accessibility, as well as exploring some key third-party applications like those from Text Help that have been designed to work seamlessly with Google Chrome to boost reading and writing confidence across all types of content and devices. So throughout the session, if you do have any specific questions, please do type them into the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom right of your screens, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we can towards the end. So that's an intro from me, and I will now hand over to David.
Thank you ever so much, Catherine. Let me just share my screen with everybody. Hopefully you can see that okay. So good afternoon, everyone. So as my colleague said, I'm a Google certified trainer. I'm also an ex-teacher. I used to teach science and maths. And today we're going to look at some of the technology to support accessibility. I've taken a really broad interpretation of what we mean by accessibility today. So although, of course, we're going to cover students maybe with visual impairments or hearing impairments, we're also going to look at some really neat things that Google does to support accessibility for all of us. So hopefully everyone will pick up something today that they find useful. The other thing I want to say is I'm going to show you a whole host of different tools today, but the presentation that will be shared with you at the end of today has links to every single thing I'm telling you. So please don't feel any anxiety that you have to write down what website am I going to, what am I showing you. Everything will be there for you at the end of the presentation via some links. So that's the name of the session today. And first of all, I just thought we'd look at Google's mission statement in terms of education. So I'm just going to leave this on the screen for you just to read for a couple of minutes. Okay. Again, if you didn't quite have a chance to read that, all these slides will come to you. So there's going to be three main pillars of what I'm covering today. I'm going to start off by looking at accessibility within the Chrome browser itself. Then we're going to look at accessibility within Google Workspace for education. And finally, Patrick, our guest speaker, is going to come and talk about read and write and a couple of other third-party Chrome extensions, again, to support accessibility. But we're going to start off with looking at accessibility within the Chrome browser. And this is some things that you may not be aware of. So first of all, I'm just going to, in my Chrome browser now, go to my settings. And on the left-hand side, I'm going to go to Appearance. And really starting off with some basics here, that you can see that you can change the zoom size, the fonts that you're using, the font size that you're using. So all of those are just some really simple things that perhaps visually impaired students might want to do in order to make readability on the internet easier. But something that, and I'm sure many of you are aware of that, but you're possibly not aware of this one. If I go to Advanced and go to Accessibility, what you may have never spotted before is this idea of a live caption. And what live caption does is if you are playing a video that you've made, it will in real time create closed captions for you. So let me demonstrate what I mean by that. If I have here a video, which I'm just going to put onto the screen. Education. This is just a video that I've made, and here's Einstein, and I was going to play this video through for you.
Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned at school.
So that's just playing my video. It's just in my Google Drive. But now, if I go to the settings in the Chrome browser and I switch on live captions, and by then clicking on this button underneath, you could, for example, decide how big the captions are, where they appear on the screen. But once you've got that switched on, if I go back to my video and just play that again for you, with a bit of luck.
Education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned at school. If you can't explain it to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. Two things are infinite, the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not sure about the universe. Anyone who has never made a mistake has never tried anything new.
So you can see there, I'm just playing a video, and by switching on the live caption within the accessibility settings for Chrome, then those live captions come on for me. And the last thing I want to just show you while we're in the Chrome browser is if I look here, add accessibility features from the Chrome Web Store, this now opens up and provides me with a whole host of add-ons and extensions that support accessibility. So for example, it could be the contrast of the page, it could be the color schemes for dyslexic students or whatever. So all of that lies within the Chrome browser. So I just wanted to show you that for a couple of minutes because I think that people aren't necessarily aware of all of those different things that are available to us. And the last thing I want to show you, which again is something that is relatively new into the Chrome browser, and I don't think it's something that very few of us have picked up on yet, but it is really clever, that any website that you go to now in the Chrome browser, any website at all, when you click onto the uni box here, you can see there's a little icon that appears to the right of the URL, and when I click on that, that is a QR code to this website. So now the ability to generate QR codes within Chrome are always available instantly from the browser by simply clicking on to that icon which you see there. Okay, so that's what I wanted to show you with the Chrome browser. The next and more significant session now is accessibility within the Chrome browser itself. So I'm going to click onto a new tab here. And again, some things that you may not know, I'm going to open up a new Google Doc. Well, of course, you all are aware that I could go to my Google Drive and I could go to new and I could create a Google Doc from there. But did you know that if you're in a new tab and you simply type docs.new, it opens up a new Google document for you. I could do slides.new, sheets.new, forms.new, makes no difference. And all of those slides just come, all of those applications just open. It's worth noting here, if I just put in here test doc, when you do that, files live in the root directory of your drive, just in other words, in your My Drive. And if you click on the icon here, this little folder icon next to the title of the document, that tells you where the document is and also allows you to move it to whatever folder that you want it to live in. So the first thing I want to show you is the idea of voice typing, which is the ability for me to talk into my computer and in real time, it will translate that into text. Worth noting here, everyone, that this only works within the Chrome browser, so you must be using Chrome. I'm going to go to now Tools, Voice Typing. I choose my language here, which obviously will default to English. And I can simply click onto the microphone. I can now talk into my computer as fast as I wish, and in real time, this is being converted to text, full stop, new line. It's using similar technology to Alexa or Google Play, so the accuracy of the translation is really very clever, and I can pretty much talk as quickly as I want, and it will convert that into text, full stop. The other thing that you can do is that you can do some formatting with this. So if I just switch this again, select all, text bold. Oh, sometimes it doesn't quite catch it, but you get the idea that you can, as well as talking, you can also add some formatting and some formatting colors. So this is a way that I can, if my literacy isn't so good or my typing skills aren't so good, or I can't write in English yet, I can still talk and it will translate. But what I can also do with this, and this is coming into obviously a wider context of accessibility, let's imagine there was a student or a parent that came into my school that had no English, that couldn't speak English at all. Well, we can use this exact same technology to communicate between people that have different languages. And I'm going to demonstrate that to you now. And when I say I'm going to demonstrate that now, I'm actually just going to borrow my son's friend who's here today, who's Polish, and he's going to demonstrate that for us. So if you just bear with me for 30 seconds, I'm just going to call him down. Alex? Alex? So, sorry about that, everyone. So you can see here, again, when I go to Tools, Voice Typing, I said before that it defaults to English. But let's imagine, as I said, you have a student or a parent that doesn't speak English. You simply click onto the drop down here and you choose, or they choose, their language. So we're going to go to Polish here. But you can see the language is written as that native speaker. So when you go down to Asian languages, it's written there because obviously if you can't talk or read English, then you wouldn't know what your language was in English. So we're going to go to Polish, and then we're going to click on to the microphone. And now my son's friend Alex, who's Polish, is now going to do this talk for us.
Dzień dobry, ja się nazywam Alex i ja mieszkam w Londynie. Mój pierwotny język jest polski i aktualnie mi trudno rozumieć moich nauczycieli, którzy rozmawiają po angielsku. Poprzez tłumacza Google ja mogę rozmawiać do komputera w moim języku i nauczyciel może przetłumaczyć, żeby mogli zrozumieć, co ja mówię, i to pomaga nam komunikować się. Kiedy zamigrowałem do Anglii, tłumacz Google pomógł mi nauczyć się aż do punktu, kiedy umiałem czytać i pisać po angielsku.
Thank you, Alex. Let me just get rid of that because it picked up that. So you can see now that that parent or that student has spoken into the computer in their first language. And what I can now do is I can go to Tools, Translate Document. I choose a language that I want this to translate to, which we're going to go to English and go to Translate. It now creates a new Google document, but this time it will translate that into English. Alex, how does that look?
That looks very good.
Thank you. You may go. Thanks. Thank you ever so much, Alex. So we can now have that conversation, even though neither of us speak the same language. And again, just to let you know that when you create this translated document, again, it's gone into the root directory of Drive. So if I click onto this little folder icon next door to the title, it tells me this file is in my Drive, but obviously I could now move that wherever I wanted it to go. And while we're on a Google Doc, the last thing I want to show you is if I go to Tools, Accessibility Settings, there is again the ability to turn on screen reader support with browse support and also screen magnifier. I'm not going to switch these on now because everything I do on the computer will start narrating to me and you won't be able to hear me. But just to let you know, if you switch on the screen reader report, you have to use the native software within the computer you're using to make that available. So on a Mac, you use something called VoiceOver. On Windows, it's recommended you use a product called JAWS, and Chromebooks have their own built-in voice reader, which is called Chrome Vox. So that there is using Google's voice typing, not only to be able to talk in your own language, but also to have a conversation and a communication with somebody who maybe doesn't speak your language at all. While we're here in a Google Doc, the next thing I want to talk about is how we make sure that the Google Docs that we use are as accessible as possible. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to open up a Google Doc, one that I prepared earlier, so just bear with me for 2 seconds. So here's a Google document, which is unformatted. And we're just going to spend a few minutes now looking at how you should make Google Documents or any word processing document or slideshow or PowerPoint more accessible. The first thing we're going to look at is the font. Now, there are hundreds of fonts available, and there's one that you probably haven't seen, which is called Lex-en-Decker, which is a Google font specifically designed for readability. So if I go to my font here, and you see I've got the option for more fonts, you can simply type in the font you're looking for from Google's library, even if it doesn't come up by default. And we're going to choose Lex-End. And if I do a Control-Alt and change it now to Lex-End, this gives us a readability font that is much better for students to read if they struggle with that. While we're on fonts, and hopefully this is something that few of you have seen before, but it is incredibly clever. If I just go through to this site here, this is called Google Fonts. Again, this link is in everything that I'm showing you today is contained within the slideshow that you will get. But what Google Fonts enables you to do if you're looking for a font is simply to type something in here. And you can see now that it is writing that in every single font available from the Google library. If you want to, I could go to categories. And if you're looking for cursive fonts, for example, you could get rid of all of the others. So you're just going to handwriting fonts. And you could say, yep, I really like this one called Satisfy. If you now click onto this font and scroll down to the bottom, what it gives you is popular pairings with that font. So if you're creating a presentation, a slideshow, or a Google site, and you want to use several complementary fonts, this website is a fantastic way, A, to choose the font that you really like, and B, to find fonts that pair with that look really good when they are together. So there is a little bit on readability fonts. The next thing I want to show you, which again, few people are aware of, is the ability for Google to pick up optical character recognition. So let's imagine that you have a photograph of some text, and I'm going to show you an example of that here. So this is a photograph. It's not text itself, it's just an image. And obviously in Google Drive, if I double click, it opens this as an image. But what most people don't realize is if I right click and choose the option to open with a Google Doc, what it does is it puts the image at the top and then it translates it into editable text underneath. And I thought, because we were doing a session today on accessibility, I would like to just show possibly how poor my spelling was when I was 8 years old, because this was actually me trying to type something, write something, which actually was published in a book, which is here. And I was published in that when I was 8 years old. And I think mainly because I couldn't spell and every other word was spelled incorrectly, as you can see. But obviously now I could correct the spelling from Google. So that's showing you the fact that you can change typed text into editable text, but you can also convert handwritten text into editable text. Again, let me demonstrate that to you. Here I've got a quote. You can see, and this is handwritten. But again, if you right click on that handwritten text and choose the option open with a Google Doc, it will do exactly the same thing by adding a photograph of the text at the top of the document, and then hopefully you can see underneath, let me just turn that around for you because for some reason it's gone upside down. You can see that's the photograph, and you can see underneath it's converted it perfectly into editable text. So in the context of today's session, perhaps you have a student in your class that isn't understanding the lesson well, or isn't taking notes or can't take notes. That student could simply take a photograph of one of their friends, notes from their exercise book, bring it into Google and convert it into their own notes by using the optical character recognition. So again, that's something that many people aren't aware of, but it is incredibly nifty. If I go back to the document that I wanted to show you earlier with the text here. So here we are back to the document before. And again, talking about making docs accessible, you need to have good contrast between the background and the foreground. So using a grey on a white isn't good. But if I select all of the information, all the wording, and I change it to black, you can see that's better. And we're already, as I said, using these Lexan Decker readability fonts. If you're making documents accessible again for people using screen reader, you should avoid the following sorts of things. You should avoid doing full justification, because that puts lots of erroneous spaces within the text, and screen readers often struggle with that. If you are adding a Google link, a link to a document, you shouldn't do this. You shouldn't, for example, if I just go and grab a link, you shouldn't just paste that link again, because the screen readers don't like that, because they will just read that out letter by letter, and it won't make much sense to perhaps a visually impaired student that wants to look at the link. What you should do instead is you should describe the link in text. So this is a link to the RM website. Highlight that text. Click onto the link button here, or right click and add a link, whichever way you prefer, and put in the link and apply. And that way the screen reader will read out the description of the link rather than just reading gobbledygook, or perhaps the words click here, because that will mean nothing to them. In exactly the same way, if a student is using a screen reader for a picture, because they're visually impaired, they need some way to describe the picture. So the way you do that is you put a photograph, you put something called alternate text against the photograph. So let me just do that now. So if I go right click and alternative text, you can add a title here and a description. And that way that when the student now comes to use their screen reader, it will make sense what you have put onto your page. And the last thing that I want to show you is that to enable students to easily navigate through a document, because that's often difficult for them, you should use a table of contents. Let me explain what that is. You can see that there's the title of my document and there's all the different sections. But at the moment, there isn't a table of contents and there isn't a document divided up by headings. So this would be difficult often for students with accessibility issues to navigate the document. So this is what you are advised to do. You go to each of the subheadings, you highlight it, and then from here where it says normal text, and many of you will only have ever used normal text when you've been doing this sort of thing before, you actually choose a heading type. So I'm going to click on the drop down and I'm going to make that heading 1. So you can see here that's changed to a much larger font size and type. I'm going back to here, doing exactly the same thing, going to choose heading 1. Here, I'm going to imagine that's perhaps a subheading, so I'm going to choose heading 2. And back to here again, we're going to make that back to a heading 1. This one into a heading 2. And maybe this one actually into a heading 3. And this one into a heading 3. So why have we done that? So what we've done now is on the left-hand side, when you click onto this little icon here, it shows the document outline, and you can now click onto the document outline and it will instantly take you to the right place within that document. So that is using this icon on the top left, which is called a document outline. But what you might want to do even beyond that is, if you've now created a document with those headings, with those sections, you go Insert, Table of Contents, and there's 2 different types here. I'm just going to choose the first one. What this does now is it puts each of those headings or subheadings into this table, and also puts in the page number, which of course are completely dynamic. So what I mean by that, also, by the way, you can see it indents depending whether it's a heading 1, a heading 2, or a heading 3, etc. They will indent on the table of contents. But if I just go to here, for example, and just move that onto a different page, and I go back to my table of contents now and click onto the refresh, you could see that the page numbers will automatically and dynamically update. And again, you can click onto each of those headings and it will take you to that section of the document. So there are some ideas as to the way we are supposed to make documents to make them really easy to use with students that perhaps have issues with accessibility. I'm actually just going to undo all those for a minute, and there's a reason for this. Because if I go right back to the beginning, there is actually an add-on called Grackle, which does exactly this for you. Grackle will look through your document and tell you everything which is not accessibility friendly. So I've added the add-on called Grackle. So I go to Add-ons, Grackle, Launch. That comes up on the right-hand side. It's now checking my document for me, and it will start to tell me everything is wrong with it. For example, there is no alternative text for the picture. There isn't a document title. And so it's going through all of the different things. High color contrast should be used. So this is a really, really clever tool which tells you now I need to go to grab all my text here. In fact, if I go back now to, is it going to let me go back? Apologies for a minute. Let me just go to, let me just take a version history from a few minutes ago. Let me just go back to this version here. So now this is back to the version of the document where I had made all those changes. So now hopefully when I go to Add-ons, Grackle, and launch that again for me, launch that again. Again, it's checking through the document, and hopefully now pretty much everything is ticked green apart from there's not a title. So if I go to my title, go to my title here, perhaps make that in the middle, recheck my document, and hopefully that will now be ticked. So that is something called Grackle, which is available to support you in making your documents more friendly. So as we move on now, a couple of other things I want to show you before we hand over to Patrick is the fact that if I go to my slideshow, let me just go to here. If I'm presenting to my class, and perhaps some students in my class are hearing impaired, if you go to a slideshow and present it, you do have the option here to click on caption preferences and switch toggles closed captions on. You can see here you can change the text position or the text size, and hopefully now you can see that as I talk in real time, that's being translated to text in my Google slide presentation. And I can do exactly the same in a Google Meet. I'm not going to show you that now, but again, in a Google Meet, you have the ability to switch on closed captions, and they will appear in real time as you are watching the Google Meet. And the last couple of things I want to show you before we finish today is that in YouTube, I'm just going to go to YouTube now. If you are watching a video on YouTube, exactly as I showed you before, you have the ability to switch on closed captions. This short video is going to look at some of the key accessibility features built into YouTube. So that is just built directly in to YouTube. But what also people probably don't realize is, let's imagine that you have directed your students to a YouTube clip, but they don't speak English. If you click onto the cog within YouTube and you go to subtitles and you go to auto translate, the student can from here change it into their language. Let's try French. And now when I click on play again, I thought a great place to start would be just looking at Google's mission statement around accessibility, which I've included for you here. And that works for me. And the last thing I want to show you is if on YouTube, you click onto these three dots here next to the word save and go to open transcript, what YouTube also does automatically on the back end, once you upload it, or once anybody uploads a video, is it timestamps and provides a transcription of that content. If you click on the three dots here, you can take away the timestamps, and then your students can simply copy and paste that text into their work, and they have that transcription there. So that was a whirlwind tour of some of the accessibility features built into Chrome and some of the accessibility features built into Google Workspace. And finally, we just had a quick look at how you can create closed captions in a Google slide, in Google Meet, and in YouTube, which also translates for you. Anyway, at that point now, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to hand over to my guest speaker, Patrick. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen, who is now going to go through read and write for us. Over to you, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Dave. Just while I'm sharing my screen here, there's some really, really useful points in there that you brought up, Dave. And one of the ones I really like is closed captions, because I think it's important that as educators, we just reinforce to our students that when they are learning online or learning digitally, that these tools are available to them on Meet, on YouTube, and within Chrome, because, you know, features like that are, of course, incredibly useful from an accessibility perspective, but useful for every student. Students that may get distracted, students that may not have English as their first language, as you've said, but tools like that are really, really important. And I'm also glad, Dave, that all of the accessibility guidelines that you put in place earlier, I have adhered to, of course, in my slides as well. So you'll see there, and this wasn't prearranged for those of you watching today, but we do use the standard in TextHub Lexend DECA, and also insist that all of our slides when we're presenting are in this high contrast mode. So The purple is not simply to jolts you and waking you up for my particular bit. The purpose of this is to improve accessibility as we go through. So I'm from Text Help, as Dave and Kat had said earlier, and I'll not give you the company spiel on Text Help whatsoever, but what I do want to share with you is that from our perspective, our simple goal is to help every student understand and be understood. And I have always loved that line that we use with the company because it's genuinely what runs through what we do. So we do that with a range of additional tools that work where your students are working. And I'm going to just show you a couple of slides, and then I'm going to go into a live demo, just as Dave did there, and run you through what these tools look like. And the first one we're going to look at is a tool called Read and Write. Some of you may well have heard of that. It's probably the most descriptive name of a Chrome extension that there could possibly be, but it does a lot more than just help with read and write and those essential skills. It's a literacy toolbar. It's going to work as a single Google extension. It's going to help with reading, writing, comprehension, focus, organization, study, and also works in exams as well, because let's not forget, when we're providing accessibility, we need to provide it both in the moment, both on remote learning, in-person learning, and in exams and assessments. So all of these areas are important. And lots of what we've seen there today, those tools that are there for students to grab a hold of and use. For some students, we need to go that little bit further, and we need to help them out a little bit more. And that's really what Read and Write, as its Chrome extension, is designed to do. So how does it do that? Well, what it does is put all of the support tools that a student might need, irrespective of their individual needs. So perhaps they might be dyslexic, they might be on the autistic spectrum, ADHD, or perhaps they simply struggle with distractions, or they simply need some additional help in helping rephrase answers to questions. They can do those with the tools that we provide in this one toolbar. The magic of it for me, and it doesn't sound very innovative, but when we see it in the hands of students, the magic is that all of the buttons are in one place in this toolbar. And this toolbar that you see on screen is going to appear wherever students learn. So we've got specialist support tools, and we've got support tools that are suitable for every student. Importantly, and it's good to know this at the outset, not every student uses every button. We find some students have the focus on the dyslexic portion, so things like text-to-speech, and to be able to listen to content out loud. Other students with perhaps mild visual impairments need to zoom in on text and have that at an increased font size or contrast. But we want to give pupils the option to use what it is that supports them in their learning the very best. And one of the things that I was really glad that Dave went through earlier was the need to have accessible documents and the need to build all of these strategies in as we're creating pieces and leverage technology to do that. The reality is, of course, that for many documents outside of what we create that our students and pupils come across, they may not be accessible. Things like PDFs, certain parts of web pages, certain parts of documents. So whilst it's good practice and best practice in all ways to inbuild accessibility, we can't always rely on it. So things like the Read and Write toolbar are there to help us in those situations as well. So when we think about where students are learning, I'm going to be looking solely today at the Google Chrome extension. So the advantage, of course, of a Chrome extension is it's going to work wherever Chrome is. So that's going to work on a Mac or a PC or a Chromebook or an Android device. It's also going to work on mobile devices as well. So that's a good start. We're going to work everywhere a student learns. If we think about what a student might start to look at when they learn, so there's the obvious one, which I'll be showing you first, which is Google Docs. They're also going to be learning and studying on web pages. They're going to be potentially looking on Word Online and through the Office suite. They're going to be looking at PDFs. They're going to be looking at EPUBs. They're going to be looking at images and videos and also paper. So we need the tools that are supplied within the Read and Write toolbar to support them everywhere they possibly learn. And I've also just listed on this slide for you all in every place as well. So think about that Google Classroom assignment that you create and you send out to a student. Is that Google assignment accessible? Can they change the font size? Can they have it read out loud? Can they get help when they're completing the stream within Classroom to send you an answer to a question? So it's important that things like extensions are there to support every place that they learn. And our online learning environments that a lot of us have become used to over the last year in particular, it's important that accessibility is everywhere and that we support it. And that's the great power for me in Google extensions. So without further ado, I'm just going to jump into the actual extension itself. So I'm going to go and I'm going to start on a Google Doc. And this is just a Key Stage 2 piece. So this is basically upper primary school at this stage. Very simple comprehension piece, introducing a new topic, earthquakes. And I'm going to show you a couple of things that are there. So the obvious one for read and write that's there are things like the ability to have text to speech. So on the toolbar that you see at the top of the screen right here, we've got all of the tools lined up that we might need. So I'm going to go right here to our play button and I'm just going to hit play.
It may seem like the earth is made up of one big solid rock.
And as that plays out, and there's a little bit of a delay as you see it on your webinar there, so I'll try and hit it again and let's see if we can see that. Okay, so one more time.
It may seem like the earth is made up of one big solid rock, but it's...
And what you may not see there, you might just see it as I've paused it really quickly, is that the sentence that's being read is highlighted in yellow and the word as it's being read is highlighted in blue. So the importance of that is we have dual highlighting, and that particularly helps dyslexic students, because for dyslexic students, they can then focus on the word and they can focus on the understanding rather than the reading part. They're listening to it as it's read out loud. They're getting a highlight of the word so they know what word is being read out loud, and they can focus on comprehension and not the decoding of the reading. And we have things like this ability to have text to speech placed in lots of different ways as we go through. We can change the options of this. So Dave talked about other languages earlier on, and in our options setting on read and write, we've got the ability to change this in up to 99 different languages. We've got the ability to, for example, even if your students are studying Spanish as a modern foreign language and it may not be their language, we can change that language so text to speech reads that out loud and helps them with that. We can change, of course, the speed. We can have continuous reading. So if we just want them to listen to a whole piece, it can continue to read the whole piece. We can also use text to speech for what we call speak as I type. And that's really useful when it comes to students who are trying to build better sentences, because as they type a word, it'll be read back to them and they'll be able to listen to it. They'll be able to proof listen and go, is that the right word in context? Have I spelt it right? Do I need to change it? But that's going to help them read out loud, or they can set it to read on each sentence as well. You'll see here, I also have added some translation in here as well. And I'll show you in just a little second exactly what that can do for us. So we can have text to speech. So that's useful in documents like Dave showed us where it's accessible. That's good. But also what we have for text to speech is the ability to take the whole passage and turn it into an audio file. So I can select the text that I want to listen to later. And I can use the text to speech engine by just pressing this icon, the audio maker icon in the toolbar. And what it's going to do is it's going to flash your screen for a second while it does it. And what it's now going to do is it's going to take all of the text that was in that document. It's going to convert it into an audio file and it's going to download it. And you'll see just in the bottom of my screen here, you'll see this MP3 files there. That's really useful for a student who wants to engage by listening rather than reading. So they can listen to that at any time. They don't have to look at the screen to hear it back. They could transfer that over to a mobile phone. So a student might need it if they're dyslexic, but a student who's studying their A-levels could benefit from this as well, because this is great for revision and review. So that gives us other ways to consume the same content. And there's also an accessibility challenge comes about. So whenever I look at a document such as this, and I go through the document, it's scrolling just a little bit slowly for me here with the wee lag on the webinar, but let's scroll down to something like this. And what I want to show you is commonly there's text that may not be accessible, and that's because it's been copied and pasted into a resource as an image. We've got this tool, which is Screenshot Reader, and all that does is take something that's inaccessible and make it accessible through text to speech. So I can click a button on Screenshot Reader and I can simply draw around a block of text right here. So I'll draw around this block of text and I'll just let go. That's all I've had to do. And what that does, much like Dave showed you on the image recognition, this will take the text, it will convert it to text to speech, and that will be read out loud. So this is not accessible text. This is just an image that's been pasted in from elsewhere. And that's now available with a simple play button that we can either play out loud or we could copy to our clipboard and we could reuse that text as well. So it's a really useful tool to make the inaccessible accessible as we go. So let me just skip
The
on.
largest
Oh, there we
earthquake
go.
ever recorded in the world was in Chile in 19.
So there we go. So you've heard that read out loud, and that was just that OCR recording. So that'll play back. So again, we've got text that might be in an image and is not accessible. And now we've got the ability to have it accessible because we can have it read out loud. So less time making documents accessible, more time enabling them to be accessible. So other things we can do on this as we go. So for example, we can use things like screen mask. So screen mask just up in the top bar. So this will give us a screen overlay. Now, if you've worked as an SEN or Senko before in your school, you might remember those colored overlays that we needed to put on for certain students. This will give you the capability to do that, and we can change the color. So we could do this as an entire screen overlay, or we could do it so we just highlight specific passages on the page. So right here on the page, we can highlight a bit that we want to focus on, so reduce distractions. Or if we had a particular condition where we needed to apply a screen mask, we could go up directly to the settings here. Okay, so I'm going to go to settings. The settings is going to pop up, and I'm going to change this background color to a fairly common one to reduce screen glare, which is yellow. And now I can change this, and I can also change the opacity of that as well. So I can change that so as I can start to blank out multiple areas of the screen, or just have a light overlay. So for pupils who need a screen overlay, this is a wonderful extension to enable them to do that. And to turn it off, I can just hit the screen mask button and I can turn that back off again. So that helps us with distractions, and it also helps us with focus then as well. So a couple of other very quick things, because I know we're tight on time. I'm going to look at how we might build understanding of some vocabulary. So I have dictionaries and picture dictionaries built in line in my Google Doc. So I can take something like the word earth here, and perhaps this is a new one. Perhaps I don't recognize it as a capital letter. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Perhaps I'm dyslexic and I can't quite decode it. But what I could do is highlight it, pop up to the toolbar again, and hit the dictionary button, and it's going to give me the dictionary definition. But you'll see beside it, it gives me the play button, so I can listen to the dictionary definition out loud. If I wanted, because it could help me, I could press the picture dictionary button, and now I have a picture reference here as well. So these symbols are standard widget symbols. So if you have a pupil with individual needs and they rely on BoardMaker or widget symbols, these will be consistent with what they expect to see. And one of the nice things, and it mightn't just let me do this because we have a little bit of a lag just on the webinar here. I can see a big red button flash and tell me my connection's slow, but I can take the image and I can actually just drop it directly into my document. So we use this. So for example, pupils where English isn't their first language, it gives them the ability to have a visual prompt directly within a document easily. It's good for retrieval practice because we can tie the image and the picture together. It's also just useful for students who are building their vocabulary as well. And the nice thing about this that I really like is if your students benefit from this, they can actually leave this up at all times, and all they need to do is click on a new word in their document, and you'll see that the picture dictionary and the dictionary changes as we go as well. So they've got the help they need when they need it. And of course, these are dockable, so we can move these around the screen. So I'm just going to get rid of these two. And just because scrolling is taking a little bit of time here on my screen for you guys, I'm going to not scroll down to the answer section at the bottom, but I am going to go and I'm going to use a thing called prediction. So we looked at reading there. We looked at vocabulary. Prediction is going to help me write. Look, we're all used to this on our mobile phones, but this gives an additional level of accessibility. First, it's in context with the document. And second, it has text-to-speech built in. So if I'm trying to write a sentence, I can hover over the word that I think might be the word, and it'll read it out.
B.
And then I can go, yes, it's definitely the. Okay, so I'll click on the word the, and it's going to read that back to me. Okay, so now I want to start to type in a few letters of the first word. It's going to give me some suggestions based in context. I'm going to be able to click it, and it's going to now give me a suggestion again. You can start to see it's helping me build my sentence as I go. The important thing is that echo back, that text-to-speech function that lets me listen to it as I go. So other things that we won't have time for today that I'm just going to show you really quickly, things that we have. So you can see here I've got some spelling and grammatical errors here. There's also things that Google hasn't highlighted. So see the picture below to see. Of course, that should be SEE. This is very common that students would swap those around. If I were to switch on my spelling, punctuation and grammar checker, it's going to pick those up because we look for sound-alike words as well. And that's very common when we've got a dyslexic student who actually phonetically works through the spelling and may not pick up on that sound-alike. This isn't going to fix it for them. This is going to help them replace it and understand why it needs done. So spelling, punctuation, and grammar check. Other things that we have really useful here, end earth, and we also have single word translate. Now, Dave showed you earlier that full translation. We only do single word translation because frankly, Google does whole page much better. But what's really useful about this, if you have, say, so this is Arabic, this is set up for, you have an Arabic language, and that's their mother tongue, their first language. They're studying through the medium of English. They may come across this one word that they need to build into their English vocabulary. And to help them with that, this translation button will give them this and allow them to play it out in their own first language. So it'll play it out in Arabic for me there as I go. So there's lots of other things here that we won't have time to go through today, but things like the dictation that Dave showed you earlier is also built into this toolbar. It's just the Google dictation, exactly as Dave showed you. But remember, the importance for a pupil with individual needs is all of the features are in the one place. They know they go to the purple puzzle piece and everything that's there for them. And we'll show you one last thing just on this before we skip across, because I know we're tight for time. But if I go to these, and I'm going to use my digital highlighters. So these at first glance just look like regular old highlighting tools that you'd have within Google Docs. But I'm just going to pick out a couple of keywords here, maybe new words I'm learning, maybe new parts of my vocabulary. Maybe I'm gathering together all the nouns and adjectives within this. But I can do a fairly magical thing here, at least I think it is, the vocabulary tool. So imagine those students that need help building vocabulary, either learning a language or struggling with a language, or you need to increase their vocabulary bank, just new words as they go. All I've had to do is highlight the new words that they've come across. And automatically what's happened here is read and write has went away. It's pulled out the word. It's added the dictionary definition of the word. It's now adding the symbols to represent the word as well. And it's given me a little note section. So I can use that. For example, I could change the word notes there as a teacher and just retype that and say, create a sentence with the word. I could have any form of activity. If I'm studying Spanish, I can say, what's the Spanish word for? Give me a sentence with that. So I can create resources here as well. So that's the short version of read and write. And very, very quickly, because we won't have time to go through all of these other things, remember what I said at the outset, which is if I jump back into, for example, a web page, I still have access to all of the same tools that you've seen there before on a web page. But I'm going to show you one last thing here on this web page, and that's the ability to simplify the page. So I can press simplify right here and just in the toolbar. And what it does is it'll strip out all extraneous information. It'll pull out my ads, my video pieces, the stuff that's not relevant to me. And as a student, what I can do is I can change the font. So I can change this to a Lexan font. I can also change the font size to help me in terms of my font size there. If I need help with contrast, I can change that to a white on black. So I can take what is a fairly heavy distraction full web page and I can turn it into something that's so much easier for me to read and so much more accessible. And if I really struggle, I can press the simplify button right here and I can change the level of the words on the page and the reading level down on that page to make it simpler for me to read. So not only does it make it accessible, but it makes it easier for me to read. And I can pull that down by multiple levels. And you'll see if I keep pressing that, it's retained the context of the piece, but it's made it easier for me to read. And one of the buttons here, and it's the very last one, is the ability here to turn that entire web page into a practice reading aloud piece. It'll take the web page content that I've just simplified. It'll let me press the record button so I can practice my reading with all the support tools, practice my reading. When I'm done, I can just press the send button and I can send that reading passage back to my teacher. That's going to help my pupils with oral fluency. All these features are all in that one extension, and they're also available when it comes to PDF. So all the things that you've saw there, also available in PDF. So if we need something to be accessible to have text read aloud, dictionary definitions, vocabulary tools, screen masking. Everything is there where students need it. And that's the important thing for me for Read and Write as we go. So I'm going to jump back, Dave, just into these last couple of slides and just finish off. I know we're just about a minute or so over here, but just to really finish off, because that's the whistle stop tour. There's 26 different features within Read and Write, but it's important to know that they support not only these areas of individual needs: dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyspraxia, ADHD, autism, visual impairment, mental health, visual stress, so many different areas that the right accessibility settings and tools can support. But I want you, in terms of a takeaway, guys, and thanks to Dave for the extra time he's given me here, is to think about this in a slightly different way, which is tools like this, the accessibility features that Dave has showed as well, may well be necessary for some students. Those students that have individual specified needs, very useful for that. But think about how these could apply to all students. If we build this accessibility and inclusion in, it's going to help every student in front of us and every teacher and colleague that we work with. Because accessibility by design is simply good practice. It's not accessible practice. It's just good practice and makes good sense for the students that we work with. And I don't know, Dave, if we're running way over, and I did warn you that we would, whether we have time to just look very, very quickly at one button on Equatio. Would we have time, or if we're done, we're done? That's okay.
Go on, Patrick, go for it. If people, yeah, go for it, Patrick.
Well, we'll go very quickly. And we were just talking there about text to speech as an example. But what you'll find is we only looked at language. So we looked at literacy, we looked at sentences and paragraphs, and we looked at PDFs and web pages. Now, your students don't only study that, they also study maths. Every one of them at some point in their lives will study maths. So we have another extension. Both of these are free for teachers, by the way, guys. We have another extension. It's called Equatio. We will not have time. Equatio takes an hour to go through, and it's a wonderful, wonderful tool for creating maths. I only want to show you one button. Remember that text-to-speech that we had in Read and Write? We can have the same thing for maths if we install the Equatio extension. So here's a past paper. You've handwritten maths on the screen and you've typed maths. Imagine you're a student. You get this piece through. You need this to be read aloud, otherwise you're in trouble. And this is not an accessible document. You can't have it read aloud. And anyway, even if you could, it's maths, and nothing reads maths out. So if I click on my screenshot reader and I go up and I simply draw a box over this maths content right here, this blue box that's going to appear, what that does is it OCRs it, just like Dave showed you earlier, and it turns this in to maths that is read aloud. So it will automatically take it, and all I have to do is press my little play button.
F of x equals x squared plus 2x plus 1.
I've now got accessible maths anywhere I go, a web page, a PDF, a document. And this even stress, it stretches all the way down to this piece here. Now this might go a little bit slow because we're on the lag, so you may not see it very quickly. But I'll just drag over this handwritten maths. You can see some of the errors I've made on that particular past paper. It'll instantly, actually, it's converted it into digital accessible maths that I can have played aloud. So if I just press play.
Line 1 show that F of a good.
Accessible maths, one tool built into Equatio, and we've got everything we could need to support accessible maths for students right there. And hopefully you'll have a look at that one later. So Dave, thank you for extending those extra few minutes there. I know that was way over time. I know you have some links coming up, so I'll not put my links page up here at this point, just to remind people that they can get both of those extensions as teachers. They're entirely free, and there's a link, I think, on your slide coming up next.
Yeah, hi, Patrick. You can just go through just the next couple of slides for me, Patrick, and just show everyone the links.
No problem. There we go.
Brilliant.
Okay, everyone. And so there are all the links from everything I showed you today and everything from Patrick as well. Catherine, over to you. Sorry, we've gone a bit over.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, yes, unfortunately, we're not going to have time for questions today because the next session, I am aware, is starting in about a minute. So if you do have any further queries, please do visit the Knowledge Hub. There is a information booth in there where you can use the chat function to ask any questions that you might have after this session and find out a lot more information. They are manned every day from 9 o'clock till 4:30 with RM staff, so please do look there for information. Within 24 to 48 hours of this session, you will receive your attendee pack, which will contain a recording of this session, a certificate of attendance, and a short survey. If you can take a bit of time to fill out that survey, it really does help us to plan for the future for new training opportunities. Please do stick around for the next session that's at 4:30 with Michael Oakes and Martin Pipe looking at effective technology strategies. And you will also have access to all of the EduSummit content on demand for 3 months after this event. So that just leaves me to say thank you very much, David. Thank you very much, Patrick, for your session today. And thank you very much for attending.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Thanks for
everyone.
stopping by.
Bye.
Thanks for having me.